She stood there, tears streaming down her face, as laughter echoed through the marble halls of the luxury hotel. Emma Clarke, 23 years old, wearing a uniform 2 sizes too large, had just spilled an entire tray of champagne glasses on the most important night of her life. But what happened next would shatter everything she thought she knew about kindness, power, and destiny. Stay with me. What you're about to witness isn't just about a girl being humiliated in front of hundreds of wealthy strangers. It's about the moment when one man's decision would change the trajectory of an entire life, proving that sometimes our darkest moments are merely the stage for our greatest transformations. Emma had arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel 3 hours before the gala began. Her hands were already trembling as she tied the apron around her waist, the fabric rough against her fingertips. She had taken this job out of desperation, not choice. 2 months ago, her mother had been diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and the medical bills were drowning them both. Emma had dropped out of college in her final semester, abandoning her dreams of becoming an architect, trading blueprints for serving trays, trading her future for her mother's present. The other servers barely acknowledged her existence. She was new, inexperienced, clearly out of place among the polished professionals who glided through the ballroom with practiced grace. Emma watched them, trying to memorize their movements, the way they balanced trays with one hand, the way they smiled politely at guests without ever making real eye contact. She needed this job. She needed the $200 she would earn tonight. She needed to prove she could do this, that she wasn't as broken as she felt. The gala was a celebration for Hartwell Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than Emma would earn in a year. Women draped in designer gowns laughed behind manicured hands, while men in tailored tuxedos discussed deals worth millions as casually as others might discuss the weather. Emma felt invisible among them, which was exactly how she wanted it. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant she could do her job and go home. But fate had other plans. The head server, a severe woman named Margaret with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, assigned Emma to the VIP section. The VIP section, where the company executives sat, where one mistake could cost her everything. Emma's protest died in her throat when Margaret's cold eyes narrowed. There was no room for negotiation, no space for fear. She would serve the VIP section, or she would leave. Simple as that. Emma picked up the tray of champagne glasses, the crystal catching the light like tiny stars. She had practiced this at home with water glasses on a cookie sheet, but this was different. These glasses were delicate, expensive, irreplaceable. The tray was heavier than she expected, the weight uneven in her inexperienced hands. She took a deep breath and walked toward the VIP tables, each step measured and careful. She was doing fine until she reached the table where 5 executives sat, their conversation animated and loud. One of them, a man with slicked back hair and a cruel smile, was telling a story, his hands gesturing wildly. Emma approached from his left side, trying to time her arrival between his hand movements. She almost made it. Almost. His arm swung wide just as she reached the table, connecting with the edge of her tray. Everything happened in slow motion, and too fast all at once. The tray tilted. Emma tried to compensate, overcorrected, and watched in horror as 12 crystal champagne glasses tumbled through the air, spinning and catching the light, before crashing down onto the white tablecloth, the marble floor, and the designer dress of the woman sitting closest to her. The sound of shattering glass cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Hundreds of eyes focused on Emma, frozen in place, her empty tray still extended, champagne dripping from the table onto her shoes. The woman whose dress had been ruined stood up slowly, her face contorted with rage. The pale pink gown, which probably cost more than Emma's entire life savings, was now stained with golden liquid, the delicate fabric ruined beyond repair. "You stupid, clumsy girl," the woman shrieked, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This dress is Valentino. Do you even know what that means? Of course you don't. Look at you. You can't even hold a tray properly. What kind of incompetent idiot did they hire?" Emma's throat closed. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of all these people. She tried to apologize, but no sound came out. The man who had hit her tray, the one whose fault this actually was, leaned back in his chair with an amused smile, saying nothing, not defending her, not taking responsibility, just watching her humiliation like it was entertainment. Margaret appeared at Emma's side, her face white with fury. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Vanderbilt," she said to the woman in the ruined dress, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This server is new, clearly not trained properly. She will be terminated immediately, and of course Hartwell Industries will cover the cost of replacing your dress." Terminated. The word hit Emma like a physical blow. She was being fired, in front of everyone, without even a chance to explain. The $200 she desperately needed gone, the reference she had hoped for gone. Her dignity, her pride, her last shred of hope, all gone. "Actually," a voice said from behind them, deep and calm and carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the room straighten instinctively, "I saw exactly what happened." Emma turned, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks, and found herself looking up at a man who seemed to command the very air around him. He was tall, perhaps in his early 40s, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that spoke of wealth so profound it didn't need to announce itself. There was something about his face, about the set of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze, that made Emma feel like he could see straight through to her soul. "Mr. Hartwell," Margaret gasped, and Emma's heart stopped. Mr. Hartwell. As in James Hartwell, as in the CEO of Hartwell Industries, as in the man whose company was hosting this entire gala, as in one of the most powerful men in the country, standing right behind her, having witnessed her complete and utter failure. "I saw the entire incident," James Hartwell continued, his eyes moving from Emma to the man with slicked back hair, who had suddenly become very interested in his empty plate. "Mr. Davidson here swung his arm and struck this young woman's tray. It was entirely his fault, not hers." The ballroom remained silent, but now the quality of that silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of spectators watching a disaster. It was the silence of people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Mr. Davidson's face turned red. "Sir, it was an accident. I was just telling a story, without paying attention to your surroundings," James finished coldly. "Just being careless and then allowing someone else to take the blame for your carelessness. Just sitting there watching a young woman be humiliated for your mistake." He turned to Mrs. Vanderbilt, whose rage had transformed into uncertain confusion. "The company will of course replace your dress, Mrs. Vanderbilt, and Mr. Davidson will personally deliver a written apology to you tomorrow morning. Won't you, Davidson?" It wasn't a question. Mr. Davidson nodded quickly, his earlier smugness completely evaporated. Then James Hartwell did something that made Emma's world tilt on its axis. He turned to her, his storm cloud eyes softening with something that looked almost like concern, and he smiled. Not the polite, distant smile of a CEO performing damage control. A real smile, warm and genuine, that reached his eyes and made something in Emma's chest crack open. "I'm sorry you had to experience this," he said quietly, and the way he said it made her feel like they were the only two people in the room. "No one should be treated that way, especially not when they're innocent. What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Emma Clarke, sir." "Emma Clarke," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt in his mouth. "Tell me, Emma Clarke, do you enjoy working here?" The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it again, unsure how to answer. Did she enjoy it? No, she hated it. But she needed it. She needed the money. She needed to save her mother. "I need this job, sir," she finally said, the honesty spilling out before she could stop it. "My mother is sick, and I need the money for her treatment." Something flickered across James Hartwell's face then, something that looked like pain, like recognition, like he understood exactly what she was feeling. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her feel naked and seen and terrified all at once. When he spoke again, His voice carried across the entire ballroom. "Margaret, Miss Clarke will not be terminated. In fact, she's being promoted. Effective immediately, Emma Clarke is my new executive assistant." The ballroom erupted into whispers, a wave of shocked murmurs that rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Emma stood frozen, certain she had misheard, certain this was some kind of cruel joke, some elaborate humiliation that would end with even more laughter at her expense. Executive assistant to James Hartwell, the CEO, the man whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose decisions affected thousands of employees, whose wealth was measured in billions. It was impossible. It was absurd. It couldn't be real. But James Hartwell was still looking at her with those storm cloud eyes, still waiting for her response, and there was nothing in his expression that suggested he was joking. Margaret's mouth had fallen open, her usual composure shattered. Mrs. Vanderbilt had sat back down, her ruined dress forgotten, her face a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Mr. Davidson looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And Emma, poor Emma, with her too large uniform and her champagne-soaked shoes and her broken dreams, could only stare at the man who had just offered to change her entire life with 6 simple words. "Sir, I don't understand," Emma finally managed to say, her voice shaking. "I don't have any qualifications. I dropped out of college. I've never worked in an office. I don't know anything about being an executive assistant." "Why would you?" She couldn't finish the question, but James seemed to understand it anyway. "Why would you choose me? Why would you help me? What do you want from me?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that reminded her of cedar and rain. When he spoke, his voice was low, meant only for her, though everyone in the ballroom was straining to hear. "Because I've been where you are, Emma Clarke. Not in this exact situation, perhaps, but I've stood where you're standing right now. I've felt what you're feeling. The desperation, the fear, the certainty that the world has already decided you don't matter. And I've learned that the people worth helping are rarely the ones with perfect resumes and flawless credentials. They're the ones with fire in their eyes and steel in their spines, the ones who keep standing even when everything tells them to fall." He paused, and something in his expression shifted, became almost vulnerable. "My mother was sick too, a long time ago. I was 19, working 3 jobs, trying to pay for her treatment. I dropped out of MIT to take care of her. And someone helped me. Someone gave me a chance I didn't deserve on paper. That chance changed everything. So yes, Emma Clarke, I'm offering you this position. Not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because I see something in you that reminds me of who I used to be, and I believe you have the potential to be extraordinary." Emma felt the tears coming again, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of something else entirely, something she couldn't name, something that felt like hope and terror mixed together in equal measure. She thought about her mother lying in a hospital bed, her hair gone from chemotherapy, her body weak but her spirit still fighting. She thought about the bills piled on their kitchen table, the eviction notice that had arrived last week, the student loans she couldn't pay, the future that had seemed so dark just moments ago. She thought about the fact that she had nothing to lose and everything to gain. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, stronger. "Yes, Mr. Hartwell. I accept." The smile that spread across James Hartwell's face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Excellent. Report to my office Monday morning at 8. Margaret will have someone collect your uniform. You won't be needing it anymore." He turned to address the entire ballroom, his voice carrying that same natural authority that made people listen. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. Please, continue enjoying your evening. The best is yet to come." And just like that, the gala resumed. Conversations started up again, waiters began moving through the crowd, musicians struck up a waltz. But Emma stood in the center of it all, her world completely transformed, watching as James Hartwell walked back to his table, pausing only once to look back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Margaret appeared at her elbow, her earlier fury replaced with something that looked like bewildered respect. "Well, she said stiffly. "I suppose you should go change. You can't very well stand here dripping champagne all night. There's a staff locker room down the hall. Clean yourself up, and then you're free to go." Emma nodded mutely and made her way through the crowd, feeling eyes following her with every step. In the locker room, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. Her hair was disheveled, her mascara smudged from crying, her uniform stained and damp. But there was something different in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. A spark, a possibility, a future. She changed into her street clothes, worn jeans and a faded sweater that had seen better days, and stood there holding the stained uniform, unsure what to do with it. Keep it as a reminder? Throw it away as a symbol of her old life? In the end, she folded it carefully and left it on the bench, a ghost of who she had been just hours ago. When Emma emerged from the hotel into the cool night air, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed the number she knew by heart. Her mother answered on the third ring, her voice weak but warm. "Emmy?" "Sweetheart, how did it go? Did you make it through your first night?" Emma opened her mouth to answer and found she was crying again, but this time she was also laughing, the two emotions tangling together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking, "Mom, you're not going to believe what just happened. Everything just changed. Everything." She told her mother the whole story, standing on the sidewalk outside the Grand Meridian Hotel, her breath making clouds in the autumn air, her words tumbling over each other in her rush to get them out. She told her about the spilled champagne, about Mrs. Vanderbilt's rage, about almost being fired. And then she told her about James Hartwell, about his kindness, about the job offer that seemed too incredible to be real. Her mother was silent for a long moment after Emma finished. Then she said, very quietly, "Emmy, are you sure about this? I mean, it's wonderful, it's a blessing, but men like that don't usually offer jobs to complete strangers without wanting something in return. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll protect yourself." Emma understood her mother's concern. She wasn't naive. She knew how the world worked, knew that kindness often came with strings attached, knew that powerful men didn't usually help desperate young women out of the goodness of their hearts. But something in James Hartwell's eyes, in the way he had spoken about his own mother, in the genuine emotion in his voice when he told her he understood, made her believe this was different, made her believe he was different. "I promise, Mom," she said softly. "I'll be careful. But I have a good feeling about this. For the first time in months, I actually have hope." They talked for a few more minutes, her mother making her promise to call tomorrow with more details, to be smart, to trust her instincts. When Emma finally hung up, she stood there on the sidewalk, looking up at the glittering windows of the hotel, at the world of wealth and power she had just been invited to enter, and she made herself a silent vow. She would take this chance. She would work harder than anyone had ever worked. She would prove that James Hartwell's faith in her wasn't misplaced. She would be extraordinary. Not for him, for herself, for her mother, for every person who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, counted out before they even had a chance to begin. Emma didn't know it yet, but her story was just beginning. She didn't know that James Hartwell's past held secrets that would soon intertwine with her present. She didn't know that the job she had just accepted would lead her into a world of corporate intrigue, hidden agendas and dangerous enemies who would do anything to see her fail. She didn't know that the man who had saved her tonight would soon need saving himself, and that she would be the only one who could help him. All she knew, standing there in the cool autumn night, was that for the first time in a very long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Sharing these powerful stories of transformation isn't always easy, but if you've ever felt the weight of desperation, the sting of humiliation, or the unexpected grace of a second chance, I invite you to subscribe and join our community. Your like helps spread these stories of hope to others who need to hear them, and your comment might share a piece of your own journey that touches another soul searching for light in their darkness. Together, we celebrate the moments that change us, the kindness that saves us, and the courage it takes to accept help when we need it most. Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Emma's hands shake as she tried to button her only professional blouse. She had spent all of Sunday shopping at thrift stores, piecing together an outfit that might be appropriate for an executive assistant at Hartwell Industries. A black pencil skirt she found for $8. A cream-colored blouse with a tiny stain near the hem that she hoped nobody would notice. The only pair of heels she owned, borrowed from her mother years ago for a high school dance, scuffed but serviceable. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone trying very hard to be someone she wasn't. But maybe that was okay. Maybe that was how transformation began, by pretending until the pretending became real. Her mother had insisted on getting out of bed that morning to see her off, despite Emma's protests. She stood in the doorway of their tiny apartment, wrapped in a faded bathrobe, her head covered with a soft cotton scarf, and she smiled with such fierce pride that Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother said, reaching out to adjust Emma's collar with gentle fingers. "You look like you belong in that world." Emma wasn't sure she believed that, but she hugged her mother carefully, mindful of how fragile she had become, and whispered, "I'm doing this for us, Mom, for you." "No," her mother replied firmly, pulling back to look Emma in the eyes. "You're doing this for you. I'm already proud of you, Emmy. I've always been proud of you. Now you need to be proud of yourself." Those words echoed in Emma's mind as she rode 3 different buses to reach the Hartwell Industries headquarters, a gleaming tower of steel and glass that seemed to pierce the sky itself. She stood on the sidewalk outside, staring up at the building that would either become her future or expose her as the fraud she felt like. Other people streamed past her, men and women in expensive suits carrying leather briefcases, moving with the confidence of those who belonged. Emma took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked through the revolving doors into her new life. The lobby was even more intimidating than she had imagined. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, modern art that probably cost more than most people's houses, a reception desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black granite. Emma approached the desk, her heels clicking too loudly in the cavernous space, feeling every eye turn to assess and dismiss her. "I'm Emma Clarke," she said to the receptionist, a woman with perfect makeup and an expression of professional indifference. "I'm supposed to report to Mr. Hartwell's office." The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. "Emma Clarke, yes, we've been expecting you. Take the elevator to the 42nd floor. Mr. Chen will meet you there." The 42nd floor. The executive level. Emma's stomach churned as she rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb higher and higher, each floor taking her further from the life she knew and closer to something she couldn't quite imagine. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a world that seemed designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. Abstract sculptures stood in corners like silent sentinels. The carpet was so thick her heels sank into it with each step. A man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, was waiting for her. His expression was carefully neutral, but Emma could see the curiosity in his eyes, the assessment happening behind his professional smile. "Miss Clarke," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Chen, Mr. Hartwell's Chief of Staff. Welcome to Hartwell Industries." Emma shook his hand, trying to match his firm grip, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate the opportunity. Please call me David. Come with me. We have a lot to cover this morning." He led her through a maze of corridors, pointing out conference rooms and offices, introducing her to assistants and department heads, whose names blurred together in Emma's overwhelmed mind. Everyone was polite, professional, but she could see the questions in their eyes. Who was this girl? Where did she come from? Why had James Hartwell chosen her when there must have been hundreds of more qualified candidates? David finally brought her to a glass-walled office adjacent to what she assumed was James Hartwell's suite. The office was smaller than she expected, but still larger than her entire apartment, furnished with a modern desk, a comfortable chair, and computer equipment that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. "This is your workspace," David explained. "Your primary responsibility will be managing Mr. Hartwell's schedule, screening his calls and emails, preparing briefing documents, and accompanying him to meetings where you'll take notes and handle follow-up items. It's demanding work. Mr. Hartwell's schedule is intense and he expects excellence from everyone around him. But he's also fair, and if you prove yourself capable, you'll find no better mentor in the industry. Emma nodded, trying to absorb everything, trying not to let her panic show. "I'll do my best," she said quietly. David studied her for a moment, and something in his expression softened. "Between you and me, Miss Clarke, I've worked for James Hartwell for 15 years. I've seen him hire and fire dozens of assistants. He's never hired anyone the way he hired you. Never offered a position to someone with no experience, no background check, no interview process. Whatever he saw in you that night, whatever instinct told him you were worth taking a chance on, I suggest you prove him right. Not for his sake, but for your own." Before Emma could respond, the door to the main office opened, and James Hartwell walked in, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. He looked different in the morning light streaming through the windows. More human somehow, less like the mythical figure who had rescued her, and more like a man who carried weight on his shoulders, who knew what it was like to fight for everything he had. He was on his phone, speaking in rapid-fire sentences about quarterly projections and market volatility. But when he saw Emma, he smiled, that same genuine smile from the gala, and ended his call. "Emma Clarke," he said, as if her name was something delightful. "You came. Good. David, has she been given the orientation?" "Just finishing up, sir," David replied. "Excellent. Emma, come into my office. We need to talk." David excused himself, leaving Emma alone to follow James Hartwell into the inner sanctum. His office was stunning, with panoramic views of the city, but what struck Emma most was how lived in it felt. Books lined the shelves, real books with worn spines. Photos covered one wall, pictures of James with what looked like his family, candid shots that showed genuine affection. A guitar leaned in one corner, looking well used. This wasn't just an office. This was a space where someone actually spent their life. James gestured to a chair across from his desk and sat down, studying Emma with that same intensity that made her feel transparent. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Overwhelmed? Terrified? Certain you've made a terrible mistake?" Emma laughed nervously. "All of the above, sir." "Good. That means you're smart enough to understand the magnitude of this opportunity. Let me be honest with you, Emma. I didn't offer you this position out of pity. I offered it because in that moment at the gala, when you were being humiliated and blamed for something that wasn't your fault, you didn't lash out. You didn't make excuses. You stood there and took it with a dignity that most people in that room will never possess. That's the kind of character I value. That's the kind of person I want on my team." He leaned forward, his elbows on his desk, his storm cloud eyes locked on hers. "But I need you to understand something. This won't be easy. There are people in this company who will resent you, who will assume you got this job through some inappropriate means, who will be waiting for you to fail so they can say they were right about you all along. You're going to have to work twice as hard as anyone else to prove you belong here. Are you prepared for that?" Emma thought about her mother, fighting cancer with every ounce of strength she had left. She thought about the bills that kept coming, the hopelessness that had been drowning her just days ago. She thought about every person who had ever underestimated her, every teacher who said she'd never amount to anything, every classmate who made fun of her thrift store clothes. She thought about the girl in the too large uniform, crying on the marble floor, and the woman she wanted to become. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm prepared for that. I'll prove I belong here. Not to them, to myself." James Hartwell's smile widened, and for a moment, Emma saw genuine respect in his eyes. "Then let's get started. Your first task is to review my calendar for the next month and identify any scheduling conflicts. Your second task is to attend a board meeting with me this afternoon. You'll sit, you'll observe, you'll take notes, and you'll learn how this company operates. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir," Emma said, standing up, feeling something like courage flooding through her veins. "I can handle that." As she left his office and returned to her new workspace, Emma didn't know that James Hartwell watched her go with an expression that mixed hope with something darker, Something worried. She didn't know that his decision to hire her had already set off alarm bells throughout the company, that powerful people were already moving against her, that forces she couldn't yet comprehend were gathering to test whether she was strong enough to survive in this world. She didn't know that the real challenges hadn't even begun. All she knew was that she had been given a chance, and she would do whatever it took to make the most of it. The afternoon board meeting was a baptism by fire. Emma sat in a chair against the wall, her notebook balanced on her lap, watching as 12 of the most powerful executives in the company debated strategy and tore apart quarterly reports with ruthless efficiency. James Hartwell presided over the chaos with calm authority, never raising his voice, but somehow commanding absolute attention. Emma took notes furiously, trying to keep up with the rapid-fire conversation, trying to understand the corporate language they spoke, the acronyms and jargon that flew over her head. She felt like a child sitting at the adults' table, desperately trying to appear competent while understanding almost nothing. Then something happened that changed everything. One of the board members, a woman with steel-grey hair and a voice like cut glass, was presenting a proposal to cut costs by eliminating the employee wellness program. "The program costs us $3 million annually," she said, her tone dismissive. "It's a luxury we can't afford in this market. The employees will adjust." Emma felt something hot and angry rise in her chest. She thought about her mother, about how her illness might have been caught earlier if her previous employer had offered better health screenings, better preventive care. She thought about all the employees who would suffer if this program was eliminated, all the families who might face the same nightmare she was living. Before she could stop herself, before she could remember that she was supposed to sit silently and observe, Emma spoke. "Excuse me." Every head in the room turned to look at her. The steel-haired woman's eyes narrowed. James Hartwell's expression was unreadable. Emma's heart pounded, but she continued, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm sorry, but eliminating the wellness program would be a mistake. Not just morally, but financially. Study after study shows that comprehensive wellness programs reduce healthcare costs, decrease absenteeism, and improve employee productivity. The $3 million you spend now probably saves you $10 million in reduced insurance premiums and increased efficiency. Cutting it would be penny-wise and pound-foolish." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could feel her career ending before it had even begun, could imagine being escorted from the building, could see her brief moment of hope crumbling into dust. Then James Hartwell spoke, and there was something like pride in his voice. "She's right. Emma, pull the data on our healthcare costs and employee sick days before and after we implemented the wellness program. I want a full analysis on my desk by tomorrow morning. We'll table this discussion until we have real numbers to work with." The meeting continued, but Emma barely heard the rest of it. She had just spoken up in her first board meeting, had just challenged a senior executive, had just potentially made herself a target. But she had also been proven right. She had made James Hartwell proud, and for the first time since accepting this position, she felt like maybe she actually did belong here after all. If you've ever felt like an outsider looking in, like you don't belong in the room where decisions are made, this next part of Emma's story will resonate with you deeply. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is speak our truth, even when our voice shakes, even when we risk everything. If these stories of courage and transformation inspire you, subscribe to join our community, leave a like to help others find these messages of hope, and share in the comments a moment when you found the strength to speak up despite your fear. Your story matters, your voice matters, and together we remind each other that we're stronger than we know. Emma worked through the night, hunched over her computer in the apartment she shared with her mother, pulling data and building spreadsheets that proved what she had instinctively known. The wellness program wasn't a luxury. It was an investment that had saved Hartwell Industries millions while improving the lives of thousands of employees. By the time she arrived at the office the next morning, her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but her report was comprehensive, detailed, and irrefutable. She placed it on James Hartwell's desk at 7:45, 15 minutes before he typically arrived, and returned to her own office to wait for the verdict. She didn't have to wait long. At 8:15, James appeared in her doorway, the report in his hand, and the expression on his face was one she would remember for the rest of her life. Pride mixed with something else, something that looked almost like wonder. "This is exceptional work, Emma," he said quietly. "How long did this take you?" "Most of the night, sir," she admitted. "But it needed to be done right." He was silent for a moment, studying her with those storm cloud eyes that seemed to see everything. "You didn't have to work all night. I would have given you more time." "I know," Emma replied, "but I wanted to prove that your faith in me wasn't misplaced. I wanted to show you that I'm serious about this opportunity." James stepped fully into her office and closed the door behind him, which made Emma's heart skip with sudden nervousness. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost vulnerable. "Can I tell you something, Emma? Something I haven't told anyone in this building?" She nodded, unsure where this was going, but sensing it was important. "My mother died when I was 21, he said, and the pain in his voice was raw and immediate, as if the wound had never truly healed. She fought cancer for 2 years. We didn't have money for the best treatments. We didn't have insurance that covered experimental therapies. We didn't have a wellness program or preventive screenings or any of the things that might have caught her illness earlier when it was still treatable. I watched her suffer, watched her fade away, and I was powerless to stop it. That's why I built this company the way I did. That's why we have the wellness program, why we offer comprehensive health coverage, why I fight the board every time they try to cut benefits to increase profit margins. Because I never want another employee to watch their parent die the way I watched my mother die, knowing that with better resources, with earlier intervention, things might have been different." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt her throat closing with emotion. She understood now why he had helped her that night at the gala, why he had seen something in her situation that resonated with his own past. They were connected by grief, by the experience of watching someone they loved fight an enemy they couldn't defeat with love alone. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry you went through that. And I'm sorry my mother is going through it now. But Mr. Hartwell, my mother is fighting. She's strong. And thanks to you, thanks to this job, I can afford the treatments she needs. You're giving her a chance she wouldn't have had otherwise. You're giving us both a chance." James's expression softened, and he reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then seemed to think better of it and let his hand drop. "Your mother is lucky to have you fighting for her. And Emma, you should know that the insurance through this position covers dependent family members. If you want to add your mother to your health plan, speak to HR today. The company will cover the premiums." Emma stared at him, unable to comprehend what he was saying. The insurance would cover her mother. The treatments that had been bankrupting them, the medications that cost more than their rent, the specialists they couldn't afford, all covered. "I don't know what to say," she managed, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to thank you." "Say you'll keep working as hard as you did on this report," James replied with a small smile. "Say you'll keep speaking up when you see something wrong, even when it's terrifying. Say you'll prove to everyone in this building that I was right about you. That's all the thanks I need." The weeks that followed were the most challenging of Emma's life, but also the most rewarding. She learned the rhythms of James Hartwell's world, the endless meetings and conference calls, the high-stakes negotiations and strategic decisions. She learned to anticipate his needs, to have information ready before he asked for it, to manage his calendar like a chess game where every move mattered. She learned the corporate politics, who had power and who wanted it, who could be trusted and who smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. And she learned that not everyone was happy about her presence. The steel-haired executive whose wellness program proposal Emma had challenged, a woman named Margaret Winters, became her most vocal critic. Margaret made sure everyone knew that Emma had no qualifications, no college degree, no business being in a position of such responsibility. She questioned Emma's work in meetings, implied inappropriate relationships, spread rumors that Emma had only been hired because of some connection to James Hartwell that nobody understood. Emma endured it all with the same quiet dignity she had shown the night of the gala. She didn't defend herself. She didn't engage with the gossip. She simply worked harder than everyone else, arrived earlier, stayed later, and let her results speak for themselves. 3 months into her new position, Emma's mother's latest scans came back clear. The cancer was in remission. The treatments, the specialists, the medications that Emma could now afford thanks to the insurance James had provided, they had worked. Emma sat in the hospital room, holding her mother's hand, watching color return to her cheeks, watching strength return to her body, and she wept with a gratitude so profound it felt like prayer. Her mother squeezed her hand and smiled, that fierce pride back in her eyes. "You did this, Emmy," she said softly. "You took a chance when it terrified you. You worked harder than anyone thought you could. You saved my life." "No," Emma replied, thinking about James Hartwell, about his own mother who he hadn't been able to save, about the way his past had shaped the choices that gave Emma and her mother a future. "We saved each other, all of us. That's what people do when they remember what it's like to need help. They reach back and pull others up." That evening, Emma returned to the office even though it was late, even though she was exhausted, because there was work that needed to be finished. She was surprised to find James still at his desk, the city lights twinkling below him, his face illuminated by the glow of his computer screen. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her pause. "My mother's cancer is in remission," Emma said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess sharing something so personal. "The doctors say if she stays on the treatment plan, if she continues with the monitoring, her prognosis is excellent." James stood up slowly, and Emma saw emotion flicker across his face, something raw and painful and beautiful all at once. "Emma, that's wonderful news. That's the best news I've heard in longer than I can remember." "It's because of you," she said, her voice steady and sure. "You gave me this opportunity when nobody else would have. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave my mother a chance to live. I will spend the rest of my career trying to repay that debt." "There is no debt," James said firmly, walking around his desk to stand in front of her. "You earned this position. You've proven yourself 100 times over in the past 3 months. The board wanted to eliminate the wellness program, and your research saved it, which means you've potentially saved lives beyond just your mother's. You've changed this company for the better. That's not debt. That's who you are. That's the extraordinary person I saw in you from the beginning." Emma felt something shift in that moment, some fundamental understanding that this connection between them was deeper than employer and employee, more significant than a simple act of kindness. They were two people who had been shaped by loss, by the experience of watching someone they loved suffer, and they had found each other at exactly the moment when they both needed to believe that good things could still happen in an often cruel world. "Thank you," Emma whispered, "for everything, for seeing me, for giving me a chance, for reminding me that there are still good people in this world." James smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she had ever seen on his face, unguarded and warm and full of something that looked like hope. "Thank you for taking that chance, for standing back up after being knocked down, for reminding me why I built this company in the first place, not for profit margins or shareholder value, but to create a place where people are valued, where dignity matters, where one person's compassion can change another person's entire life." They stood there in the quiet office, the city spread out below them like a constellation of possibilities, two people who had been brought together by humiliation and kindness, by shared grief and hard-won hope. Emma thought about the girl she had been just 3 months ago, sobbing on a marble floor, certain her life was over. She thought about the woman she was becoming, confident and capable, and no longer afraid to speak her truth. The months that followed brought new challenges. Margaret Winters launched a formal complaint about Emma's hiring, triggering an investigation that examined every aspect of her employment. Emma endured interviews with HR, with board members, with investigators who seemed determined to find evidence of impropriety. But the investigation found nothing because there was nothing to find. Emma had been hired unconventionally, yes, but she had proven herself through exceptional work. James Hartwell had taken a chance on her, but that chance had paid off for the entire company. When the investigation concluded and Emma was fully exonerated, Margaret Winters resigned in disgrace, and Emma felt no triumph, only sadness that someone had been so consumed by bitterness that they couldn't see past their own prejudices. A year after that night at the gala, Emma stood in the ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel once again. But this time, she wasn't wearing a too large uniform. She was wearing an elegant black dress that she had purchased with her own money, earned through her own hard work. She was attending the annual Hartwell Industries Gala, not as a server, but as James Hartwell's executive assistant, as a valued member of the company, as someone who belonged. James found her standing near the spot where she had spilled the champagne, where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. "Thinking about that night?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Always," Emma replied honestly. "It was the worst night of my life and the best night of my life, all at once. Funny how that works." "Not funny," James said quietly. "Profound. The moments that break us are often the same moments that remake us into who we were always meant to be." Emma turned to look at him, this man who had saved her without even knowing how desperately she needed saving. This man who had seen potential in her when she couldn't see it in herself. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "About how you told me someone helped you when you were young, when you were taking care of your mother. You never told me who that person was." James was quiet for a long moment, his storm cloud eyes distant with memory. His name was Robert Chen, David Chen's father. He owned a small tech startup, and he hired me as a programmer even though I had dropped out of school. He taught me everything he knew about running a business with integrity, about treating people with dignity, about remembering where you came from and reaching back to help others climb the same ladder you climbed. When he died, he left me half his company. That's what became Hartwell Industries. Everything I've built, everything I've accomplished, started with one man's decision to give me a chance I didn't deserve on paper. "And now you're passing that forward," Emma said, understanding flooding through her. "Now you're doing for others what Robert Chen did for you." "We all are," James replied, looking around the ballroom at the Hartwell Industries employees laughing and celebrating, at the company culture he had built on the foundation of one man's kindness. "That's the secret that changes everything, Emma. We don't succeed alone. We don't heal alone. We don't transform alone. We do it together, through acts of compassion and courage, through believing in each other when belief seems impossible, through remembering that every person we meet is fighting battles we can't see and deserves dignity even in their darkest moments." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that came from gratitude so deep it couldn't be contained. She thought about her mother, healthy and strong, working part-time at a bookstore she loved, living the life she had almost lost. She thought about the thousands of Hartwell Industries employees whose lives were better because of the wellness program she had helped save. She thought about the person she had become, confident and capable, and no longer afraid of her own voice. "I want to do what you've done," Emma said quietly. "Not just work for you, but learn from you. Learn how to build things that matter. Learn how to use success as a tool for helping others. Learn how to be the person for someone else that you were for me." James smiled, and there was pride and affection and something deeper in that smile, something that spoke of mentorship and possibility, and a future neither of them had imagined that night when champagne glasses shattered and a life began to rebuild itself from broken pieces. "Then let's get started," he said, "because the world needs more people like you, Emma Clarke. People who get knocked down and stand back up. People who speak truth even when their voice shakes. People who remember what it's like to need help and never forget to offer it when they have the power to do so. People who understand that success isn't measured in profit margins, but in the number of lives we touch, the hearts we heal, and the hope we create in a world that desperately needs more of it." This was Emma's journey from humiliation to empowerment, from desperation to dignity, from invisible to invaluable. But really, it's all of our journeys, isn't it? Because we've all stood where Emma stood, feeling small and broken, and certain that nobody sees us, nobody values us, nobody believes we matter. And we've all needed someone to reach down and pull us up, to believe in us when we can't believe in ourselves, to remind us that our past doesn't define our future, and our mistakes don't determine our worth. If this story touched your heart, if you've lived your own version of Emma's transformation, or if you're still waiting for your moment when everything changes, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to hear more stories of courage and compassion, stories that remind us of our shared humanity and our capacity for extraordinary change. Leave a like if you believe in the power of second chances, and share in the comments your own story of a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you were able to be that person for someone else. Together, we create a constellation of hope, a community of souls who understand that we're all connected by our struggles and our triumphs, by our capacity to hurt and our capacity to heal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that stories like Emma's matter, because they do. They remind us that no matter how dark the night, dawn is always waiting. No matter how deep the fall, we can always rise again. And no matter how alone we feel, there are hands reaching toward us in the darkness, waiting to pull us into the light.